Hello and welcome to Polyglot Principles. My name is Modja and this is the channel where I teach you how to learn a language like a genius by teaching you the principles of language learning. Alright, let's dig into today. The title of the video is Language Learning, Getting Over the Plateau, right? So this has probably happened to you before. Maybe it's happening to you now. Consider, for example, if you're a native English speaker, whatever your native language is, notice that right now you're at a point where you don't improve very much. So for example, I speak English and I've reached a level where even after years of speaking, I speak English very well, of course. It's my native language. But I've reached a point where if you compare my English this year with my English last year, it's not that much better. It's about the same. So I've reached a kind of plateau, right? A level ground. And perhaps you've had the same experience in another language, right, that you're trying to learn. Maybe, okay, English I speak well, there are languages you speak well, but there could be a language where you're stuck as an intermediate, or you reached a point where you keep speaking or interacting with people and you're not getting better and better results in the language. So the natural question becomes, well, how do you get over this plateau? How do you overcome this plateau? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Where does the plateau come from to begin with? All right, so before we start, as usual, oh, and by the way, I'm going to be giving useful tips to the very end, right? So if you don't want to miss out on anything, make sure to stay till the end of the video. So, as usual, I have a question for you, right? What do you think is the cause of a language learning plateau? What causes your level to remain locked and not improve? What are the reasons for that, right? What do you think is the cause of a language learning plateau? Please pause the video, go to the comment section below, and write down what you think is the cause of the plateau. And then continue this video to find out if your reasons agree with mine, or if you've thought of something that I haven't thought of, right? I always want to know what you think, and I'm always willing to learn from you. All right, so let's get into this, right? Before we even start by thinking about how to overcome the language learning plateau, we need to talk about what it is, where does it come from, and how to overcome it. So let's go step by step. What is a language learning plateau? Right, so let's just go deep into nature. What is a plateau in general? Right. When you say something is a plateau, it means it's flat, right? The plateau is something that is flat. It doesn't go up, it's not steep, and it doesn't go down, right? It's just flat. Okay, so when you're speaking a particular language, you may find that, for example, you probably noticed this, right? Like, I noticed this, for example, with German, right? At the beginning, speaking German every day was enough. The more I spoke, the better I got. And then I reached a point where I speak, but my level is not getting worse, but it's definitely not like I'm experiencing great improvements, right? So I'm also, my level, my skill is stuck somewhere, right? So throughout life, we have many plateaus. This is not just about language. There are plateaus that happen everywhere. For example, think about things you do on a daily basis. For example, typing, right? When you first learned how to type, the more you typed, the faster you got at typing. And then you reached a point where your typing hasn't gotten any better. You probably noticed that, right? When it comes to, let's say, driving a car, maybe, or riding a bicycle, right? At the very beginning, you didn't know how to ride the bicycle, right? And then you got onto the bike, right? And you struggled, but the more you rode, the better you became. And then you reached a point where your cycling's capacity, speed, ability, the stunts you could do stopped increasing, right? So this is a natural thing. It's not just about language learning, but it's something that occurs in any form of learning, right? So the tips I'm going to share with you here about how to overcome the language learning plateau are going to be tips that you can use for any form of learning, whatever it is that you're doing, right? So we now know what a plateau is. Let's ask a simple question. Well, what causes a plateau to happen, right? Basically, Our mind and body are very efficient. What this means is that they like to, the natural system, our body, and I think nature itself, is designed or set up in such a way that it wants to get something done with the least amount of effort. Okay? So, for example, if you look at water, right? The flow of water. If water always tries to take the easiest path, it's always trying to flow downhill, right? If water has an option of going downhill or flowing uphill, it's going to go where it's easier, the place that requires least effort, downhill, right? This is just water. And this is going to be true with all sorts of things you'll find in nature. And your nature, your mind is also the same way, right? Your body is the same way, right? You want to get things done with as little effort as possible, right? Isn't it? So, for example, you might have noticed this. I noticed this, right? There was a time when I was like tremendously overweight, right? Everybody was complaining about my weight. And then I decided to walk for an hour every single day, right? So when I started walking for an hour every single day, I noticed that my weight dropped and everybody was commenting about it. After a period of about maybe 2 to 3 months or 4 months, I continued to walk for an hour every day, but my weight was no longer going down. My weight became level. That's called the plateau again, right? What happened? What happened here? Here's what happened, right? At the very beginning, when I started, my body was not used to physical exercise. So when I walked, the body had to adapt to my new expenditure of energy, right? And so the body adapted and changed. But after a while, my body became efficient, so that even by continuing to walk for an hour every single day, my body was not changing at all, right? So, and same thing happened. There's this book I read by Arnold Schwarzenegger. He wrote a book, Total Recall. Yes, it's the name of his movie. It's also the name of his book, right? I really recommend his autobiography. So, in Total Recall, what does Arnold Schwarzenegger say? So, Arnold was talking about how he was a bodybuilder, right? So, he was talking about how one thing he noticed as he was bodybuilding was that when he started to do an exercise, let's say a certain form of weightlifting, maybe to build the biceps or some muscle, he noticed that at the very beginning, when you did the exercise for the first time, you put in the effort and you noticed a change in your muscles, immediate effect, like not immediate but near immediate results, right? Clearly the body was adapting and you're becoming more muscular. But he noticed that if you continued to lift to the same exercise routine, lifting the same weights, what's going to happen eventually is that the body is going to become, you're going to keep lifting those weights, and notice that he's going to keep lifting those weights, but the body, the muscles are not going to increase, or they're not going to increase as much, or the increase is going to be so small that it's almost impossible to notice. That again is the plateau when it comes to the physical body. And then Arnold Schwarzenegger said something interesting, right? He says, so what he figured out was that you need to shock the body. You don't want it to get into any particular routine. You want to shock the body by doing activities that are difficult for it and that it's not used to. Because whenever the body is facing something new, whenever the mind is facing something new, it has to adapt, right? You've noticed this, right? If you go to let's say, if you've been living in the same place for many years, you might have noticed this, right? That after a while you fall into a routine, right? You fall into a routine. You do the same stuff over and over again. You wake up on the same side of the bed. You brush your teeth with the same hand in the same way. You rinse out in the same way. You walk out of your house in a particular way. You put on your trousers in a particular way. You go to a particular location. All of that, right? But if we change your environment, if we put you in an unknown environment where there's no routine established, you have to adapt and change and grow, right? So this feels like a tangent, but it's not. It's actually very related to what we're talking about here when it comes to language learning. You are stuck in a language learning plateau because you have been doing the same thing over and over again, and your mind has become efficient, right? Your mind has become efficient. What do I mean here? For example, let's take one of the most important, what I consider to be the most important language learning activity, especially at the very beginning, is to speak. And what I noticed is that at the very beginning of learning a language, the more I speak, the more I improve, the better I get. Obvious, right? This is clear just from observation. But I noticed I reach a certain point where even though I'm speaking, like I speak more and my level is not increasing necessarily, right? My level is around the same. There's no major improvements. And I've noticed this also with my language exchange partners, right? So right now I'm learning German, so my language exchange partners are learning English. Some of them speak reasonably good English. We've been speaking for months and I haven't noticed any significant increase in the way they're speaking. Right? And before I wasn't able to figure why this is, to figure it out. But now I understand why, right? Basically what's happened here is that the mind says to itself, right? The language learner's mind is saying to itself, look, sure, my grammar is not good. Sure, I don't know enough vocabulary. But I'm able to communicate ideas. People can understand what I'm saying. What I'm doing is working. It's getting me the results. There is no need for me to put in more effort. There's no need for me to learn more vocabulary. There's no need for me to express myself differently because the way I'm expressing myself is enough. That's what the mind is saying. And so someone gets locked, you get locked into a pattern of speaking or of using the language that is comfortable enough, right? And typically this is around intermediate level, isn't it? When you're at the intermediate level, well, you can do most things, dude, right? You can speak, you can say things, people understand what you're saying. When people speak, you can listen to them. When you go to the restaurant, you can order food, you can enjoy a conversation as a tourist. Once you get to this level of comfort, the mind says to itself, look, there is no need to improve. We know enough. It's trying to be efficient. There's no need to expend more energy. There's no need for us to adapt any further. We are already fully adapted, right? So then the question becomes, well, how do you break out of this plateau? Right? It goes back to what I was saying before is you want to put, just like if you want to kind of break your patterns, your way of behaving, you need to put yourself in an environment where you don't know how to behave. Naturally, you'll adapt, right? This is the same with language learning, right? So you want to start performing activities that are challenging that you haven't performed before in the language. So for example, I noticed something, right? I've been speaking French for many years, and there was a point where my French was stuck. I wasn't getting any better. And then at some point, I decided to learn French grammar. And guess what happened? The more French grammar, as I learned French grammar, I noticed that my level began to improve because I was performing a new activity that was challenging for me, right? So this is the key, right? To break out of the plateau, you need to find specific activities, challenging activities, and continue to perform those language learning activities. It could be many things. Maybe it could be to speak into a camera in the language and then analyze your mistakes in the language, right? So one of the most powerful ways in which our mind learns is by contrast. Actually, I think a neuroscientist said that I was actually, a while back when I was in college, I was looking at, I was listening to a certain lady, Anat Baniel, I think. She's a neuroscientist. And she was saying that the way our mind learns things, the way the human brain learns something new is through contrast, right? To figure out what something is, you need to know what something is not. That's how our brain learns. So basically, what that means is to know what is right, you need to know what is wrong. So there needs to be that contrast of right and wrong, good and bad, correct and incorrect. Well, how does this connect to language learning and getting out of the plateau? Well, you want to perform activities where you're able to, you make mistakes, that is, you identify what's wrong and you correct those mistakes. Where it's like mistake error correction. You have to put yourself in error correction types of zones, right? So let's say, for example, you've been using the language, but you've never really taken time to write complicated articles. Okay, you try to write a complicated article in the language, right? As you write it, you're going to notice many mistakes, which you're going to be able to correct, maybe with a language teacher or a translation program, right? Like DeepL or Google Translate. And what's going to happen there is that you're going to notice that you're going to be able to identify your mistakes. And once you identify a mistake, you're also beginning to figure out how things should be done. So you're in the error correction mode. You're in the zone of contrasts, When you're in the zone of contrast, your level always continues to go up. You can't be stuck in a plateau if you're putting yourself in situations where you make mistakes, you identify your mistakes, and you correct them in the language. Okay? So if you do that, if you continue to expose yourself to challenging situations where you're getting stuff wrong in the language, you're identifying your mistakes and you're correcting them, your brain is going to continue, your mind is going to continue to adapt, which means you're going to continue to get better. You're not going to be stuck in the plateau. Remember, at the beginning of the language, you knew nothing. So at the very beginning of the language was challenging to you. You are making a lot of mistakes and people are correcting them. That's why you are getting better. That's why the more you spoke at the beginning, the better you got. But you reached a point called the plateau, where you became so comfortable that, look, you aren't really struggling anymore. Things have become comfortable and easy. When things are comfortable and easy, you can't grow. You need to go into your discomfort zone. Not comfort zone, discomfort zone, outside of the comfort zone. This is the area where you're making mistakes, right? But the key is, in this particular, when you go into your discomfort zone, what you want to do is, you don't want to, you want to make the challenges big, but not so big that you can't conquer them, right? So maybe you might notice that you haven't been spending any time listening to the language. So maybe you decide to play the radio, but the radio might be too complicated. You might have to start with material that is easier to understand, but that is a stretch for you. The key is to continue stretching yourself. If you don't stretch yourself, you don't push yourself, you don't put yourself in the discomfort zone, you're always going to remain in the plateau. Alright, I've gone really deep and technical here, right? But I hope it, as I promised you before, it's going to be valuable to the very end. Alright, thanks a lot again for watching this video. Every Monday at 8 a.m. Central African Time, I publish a video on this channel, Polyglot Principles. And my job is to help you to learn a language like a genius by teaching you the principles of language learning. Thank you very much once again, and hope to see you on the next video, yeah? Bye.